everyone, I'm Rebecca and welcome back to my sewing room. Today I wanted to go over how I made my approximately 1906 Edwardian jumper ensemble. So when I first decided to do this project, I was looking for a quick and easy project that I could do in maybe a few days, just following a pattern and being done with it. No new undergarments, nothing like that, just doing a jumper and maybe a blouse and being done with it super fast. So naturally it turned into a almost 4 week project because I cannot help but reinvent the wheel whenever I do anything. So that's just how I work. When I first decided to do this project, I was like, hey, I think I want an Edwardian jumper dress. Someone had directed me towards the black snail patterns, and I saw that they had the Edwardian jumper dress and was thinking like, oh great, I will just do this pattern and maybe I'll do their shirtwaist pattern and it'll be a super quick project and I'll be done with it. But then I realized that wasn't really the jumper dress I was going for. I found this image right here, which is an approximately 1906-1907 jumper made out of velvet, which was a little bit more than what I wanted to do, since I had kind of already decided I wanted to make the jumper out of this fabric here, which was actually just stash fabric left over from a 50s dress that I made a couple years ago. But I decided that I wanted to make the fancy jumper just in not fancy materials. So the black snails pattern went out the window because I wound up using almost nothing from that pattern, and I wound up using very little of the black snails blouse pattern too. What I wound up doing was I wound up creating multiple layers of an Edwardian outfit. For this project, I created a early Edwardian corset, S-bend style corset. I created a corset cover, like the poofy, so it would give me that pigeon front look. And I created the shirtwaist blouse, and I created the jumper. So it wound up not being that simple project at all that I was kind of anticipating. Oh, and I created a bum pad. The only thing I didn't create, I guess, is the petticoat, because I already had that. And the hat, actually, I already had as well. So yeah, this wound up being a lot more of a project than I kind of anticipated, but it was still fun, and I'm really happy with the outcome. I'm glad that I didn't kind of just do the easy way. And maybe my next project will be a super easy project. Certainly isn't the one that I'm working on now, which is a semi-secret 1890s Elsa dress that I'm doing as a group kind of with a bunch of other costumers. So look for that later. That will be in August. Let's dive into the layers that made up this outfit. So the first layer of this outfit is the corset, or the first layer at least that I made of this outfit. It's the corset. I used truly Victorian 1903 corset, and this is TVE01, and I have to say, this pattern, fantastic. Highly, highly, highly recommend this pattern. It went together brilliantly. I did make a mock-up, and before I made the mock-up, I added 1 inch extra in length, both top and bottom, because I am 5'10", and I tend to always need to add extra length. So I did add extra length, but I made that mock-up, and it needed almost no tweaks. I actually wound up cutting down the front of the bust from what I added to, so I cut that down to a little bit less than this gives 3 busts, so it's less than the high bust on this pattern. And I think I took in one other pattern piece, like a tiny, tiny skosh. In hindsight, I should have added more hip spring because this era is actually meant to be padded underneath the corset, and I kind of forgot that when I tried on my mock-up. So my corset is actually fitted pretty well to my hips, and then I wear my padding over the corset. So it's not necessarily what they would have done, but it works just fine anyway, and I think that it still gives me the correct shape with the padding over versus the padding under. So it's all right. But again, highly, highly recommend this corset pattern. It just went together so easily. It almost makes me want to make more of them. But since I already now have the corset for this era, what I might do is I might try an 1890s corset because it's kind of the only one that I'm missing. And I can only hope that it will go together as nicely as this, because this really was fantastic. So to tell you a little bit more about the corset, it is 2 layers. The inner layer is cotton canvas. The outer layer is a silk taffeta from my stash. And it's boned with, I think exclusively actually, it is boned with German plastic whalebone. I get mine from corsetmaking.com out of Pennsylvania. And they have really great German plastic whalebone, reasonable price, and the shipping's pretty fast. So they're a pretty cool company. And as I mentioned, it's entirely German plastic whalebone. The center back by the lacing is a thicker whalebone. It's both a thicker whalebone that used to exist that you can't get anymore, and it's also, in some cases, it's 2 pieces layered together. So I do have that over by the lacing, but otherwise it's the 6mm by 1.5mm German plastic whalebone or synthetic whalebone. I find that it gives really fantastic support, even better, I would say, than metal boning, and I have the synthetic whalebone now in 3 of my corsets, and I highly, highly recommend it. It's really, really great. I did the method of sewing of this corset where you encase all of your seams together. Now that's the one thing that the pattern doesn't really include. It doesn't really mention how to finish your seams, you know, if you're just gonna have raw edges inside, serging inside, etc. But I was taught when I first started making corsets to do the kind of sandwich method where you have 2 pieces together like this, and then your next 2 pieces that you're adding on to that, you put on the outside, either side, and then fold up, and you just keep doing that. So I hope that makes sense. I call it the sandwich method, and I have made most of my corsets, I think, in that method, and what you get is an interior that has no exposed seam edges, and I really like that. So that's just how I did it. I think that the pattern really wants you to do it with like just finishing your edges by serging, or whatever way that you finish your edges if you don't have a serger. Again, I don't know, I always feel like it's kind of stronger to do that sandwich method and everything is nicely finished, but of course if you mess up and the fit is wrong, you're kind of screwed. So you do you. But I finished the corset with some, it's just poly lace, but it's lace that I had left over from my 17th century dress, I believe, from several years ago. And so that's just around the bust, and it's bound with self-bias tape. So bias tape that I made out of the silk. And the inside for boning channels, I just used like the boning channel tape that you can get from corset making. So I think that about covers it for the corset, but if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them below and I will try to answer those questions. Again, highly recommend the pattern. I think that anyone who, honestly, probably anyone who is familiar with sewing and is ready to tackle a corset, which they're not hard, they're just kind of tedious, I think you'd be fine with this pattern. It really does go together quite well. So the next layer that I made for this project is the corset cover. Now I did an entire video on this because this corset cover was actually my project in a day that I did in a collaboration with a whole bunch of other costumers. And so I will link to that video here, and you can just go watch that if you haven't seen it already, and once you've finished the rest of this video. Okay, so over the corset cover is the shirtwaist. The shirtwaist wound up being a total Franken pattern, which is my term for when I combine a whole bunch of different patterns together, and it's typically what I do. Instead of just using the Black Snails shirtwaist pattern, I decided, I think I held up the collar and it was nowhere near my neck size, and I also decided that I wanted a different shaped yoke than is on this pattern. So what I actually did was I Franken patterned it mostly with this pattern right here, which in my opinion looks absolutely hideous on the cover, but has some hidden gems inside. I really like the shape of the yoke of this pattern on the blouse. You really can't see it because they've covered it with ugly ruffles, but it has a really nice yoke. And so what I did was I took that yoke and I took the bodice, but I think I altered the bodice because this one has a lot of gathering right in the front and mine doesn't have that much gathering. So I altered it slightly. I didn't do a zipper. I did buttons up the back. I did this for the body of the shirtwaist. And the collar, of all the pieces, I couldn't find my collar piece for this pattern. I really wanted to use it. So I kind of looked at what it looked like in like the diagram page and approximated that with what I would need for my neckline. I did actually wind up shaping the neckline here because I wanted that nice high point on the side, but my neck is really pretty short, and so I had to scoop it quite a bit in the front and also a little bit in the back. I did add collar stays so that this would stay up nice and tall. Of course, what that means is that I really can't turn my neck any farther than that, but it does make my collar stay up pretty nice. So to make this pattern more difficult for myself, on the yoke, I decided to do pin tucks and almost insertion lace. I got a little nervous when it came to actually making the lace insertion, and I also didn't want to have the look of just lace. So what I did is the lace is just laid on top of the fabric. The yoke is made out of a batiste that I had left over in my stash. And this lace, the insertion lace, is also from my stash. It's just a poly lace, but it's a not ugly one in my opinion. And so that's all laid down nicely with the tucks. Trying to figure out the shape of this yoke and then making the extra math to allow the tucks was a little challenging, but because this does not have tucks as part of the pattern. But I did manage it. I think what I basically wound up doing was pretty much just cutting the neckline after I had done the tucks. So cutting more of the shape of the yoke after I'd done the tucks, but giving an approximation so I wouldn't wind up wasting lace, because I had just barely enough lace for this project. So that was really lucky. But again, overall, it went together pretty easily. The tucks and the lace were definitely the hardest part. The rest of the blouse, of the shirtwaist blouse, is actually a fabric that I've left over from my first Regency dress that I made. I learned in the making of this project that it is not cotton. I think it's a cotton blend, but it definitely will melt on the highest setting on the iron, because I know that from experience. And I used that for the body of the blouse here, and then I used the reverse so that I get the nice stripes. I used that for the sleeve, and then back to vertical for the cuffs. I really like how this came out. Now the sleeves, I went back to the black snails pattern for the sleeves, but these sleeves are ginormous. So I did the black snails pattern, but I took out like probably at least 5 or 6 inches of width in the sleeve because I just did not want it that big. But I used that, and I think I also, these are meant to be, I think these were meant to be full length. So I know I played with the length. I believe I shortened the length of my sleeve because I wanted this to hit at a 3/4 sleeve and have the band here, because my inspiration dress had sleeves like this. I wound up adding some nice deep frilled lace around the shoulder, and I kind of followed the stripe for where I wanted the hem of the lace to sit. So that's where I tried to fit it into my shoulder that way. And I've just gathered this. This is again just like a nylon net lace. This is left over, I believe, from my first Edwardian outfit that I made back in 2011. So it's been that long. And again, I had like just enough to do these shoulders. I think I've got just a tiny bit more. So it was really a great stash busting exercise for the blouse. The velvet ribbon you might recognize because the velvet ribbon, I decided I wanted to do a velvet ribbon trim on the jumper, and therefore I should put some on the blouse, but I wanted it in an impermanent manner. But yes, the velvet trim is from the velvet dress, and I actually realized that I would need more for this dress. So yes, I did order another 20-yard spool of the velvet ribbon. I believe I have now purchased 120 yards of said velvet ribbon. I will post the link to it on Amazon if anyone else is interested in some velvet ribbon. It's a good price. It's fast shipping. And I have gotten a lot of use out of it. That's an understatement. I wanted this ribbon to be impermanent. I wanted to be able to use the shirtwaist blouse for something else that maybe doesn't have velvet trim all over it. And so what I've done here is I'm this was kind of a saga because I really wanted beading lace, but of course this is height of coronavirus and everything, so I made this about a month ago, and I couldn't just go to Joann's and get beading lace. Couldn't find any online anywhere, so it was a whole big thing. So I realized that I had a little bit of fake beading lace, which is that kind that has the ribbon sewn in on the backing. And so what I did was I unpicked all of that ribbon and turned it back into beading lace and threaded it through. And I really like how it looks. It was the kind that already had that little ruffle on, so that was really nice. This is actually, I believe, a different beading lace that I had in my stash that I had, again, like just enough for the neckline. So all of this ribbon can just be untied and pulled out and threaded back in later if I wanted to, but I could thread a different ribbon in to go with a different outfit. And I really like how versatile that makes it. So yeah, it does, the whole blouse does button up the back, which is why if you have seen my getting dressed video, I needed assistance with that. It's definitely difficult to do myself, but I have managed it once. It just buttons up the back with some sort of pearlized buttons that the wonderful Judy Gravitch sent me. One other thing to note with the blouse that I forgot at first is that the blouse actually has a peplum attached. That's the other idea that I took from the Black Snails pattern, is that I did use this peplum view here. It didn't quite, I think the shape wasn't quite right for me, so I did change the pattern shape a little bit, but I used this peplum to attach to the bottom of the gathers of the blouse. That way, A, I don't have to worry about the gathers shifting around, and B, I don't have to worry about it coming untucked. I've actually since used this for a blouse that's kind of a history bounding blouse that I got from Target that was very short-waisted. I went and I used the same pattern and put the peplum on that too, and now that doesn't come untucked either, so highly recommend doing the peplum on the bottom. Mine I just made out of muslin because no one's going to see it anyway. It really does keep everything very nicely in place. I think that is about everything for the shirtwaist blouse, but if there's something that I forgot to cover and you have a question, again, please just shoot me a comment down below. So now the final layer, which is the jumper. I almost completely ignored the Black Snails pattern that I'd originally purchased for this purpose for the jumper. The only thing that remains from the Black Snails pattern is that this waistband, which is actually a built-in waistband on this jumper, this waistband is the belt that comes with the jumper. So that's the only thing that remains. The skirt is a skirt shape from Period Costume for Stage and Screen, which, as I've mentioned before, is my favorite. It's my, like, basically my Bible of Victorian sewing. I just love this book. I know it's out of print, so I really am sorry for those of you who don't have the opportunity to get it. But if you ever see it anywhere for a reasonable price, jump on it so fast, because this book is just, like, seriously amazing. And so I just went and I chose, to be honest, I don't remember which pattern, but it's one of the Edwardian skirt patterns from this book. And that is the shape of the skirt. One of the things that I noticed with this skirt pattern, or with this skirt shape, I should say, is that I had originally added pockets in here because everyone loves pockets. We all want pockets in all of our stuff. But unfortunately, this era of skirt is actually too slim to the hips to allow for pockets. I put the pockets in and they just gaped open. So I had to remove my pockets, which was a very sad thing. But I now get the nice slim line of the period. This is made out of an upholstery type fabric. I think it's a cotton blend is my guess. But it's an upholstery type fabric that is left over from a 1950s dress. It's not the Butterick walkaway dress. It's the Butterick, like, second version of the walkaway dress that is, I don't recommend that pattern at all. But I made that in 2016 using this. And I had plenty left for this jumper, so that was a really nice feeling. And so it's that on the outside, and it is lined with cotton sateen On the inside, you can see my seams are just serged. That's how I flatline everything, is I just serge the edges and then assemble. The trim is the velvet ribbon. I had decided from the get-go really that I wanted the velvet ribbon trim all over the jumper straps and the belt, but it wasn't until I polled the audience on Instagram, which PS, if you're not following me on Instagram, go follow me at Lady Rebecca Fashions. But I polled my Instagram audience to ask about the skirt trim and what I should do, whether I should do like down the front, around the hem, etc. So they graciously helped me with that decision. And the jumper straps are really just, I kind of winged it a little. I mocked them up with some really, really wide vintage ribbon that I have, just figuring out the length that I would need from my waist to the back, and then realizing that I needed them, A, to be actually narrower than that ribbon, it's a very, very wide ribbon, and B, that I really needed them to taper quite a bit in. The last thing that I really needed to figure out with this was actually that this is a curved shoulder seam. That way I wouldn't get those wings, it wouldn't fly up. I really needed that curve so I get the nice sloping shoulder look. So it's a fairly significant curve seam that I have up there. And then just trying to figure out the width of if I wanted this band. At first I wasn't loving the band. Really glad I put it on there because I think it really kind of makes that look. Now the straps, they are fixed to the waistband in the front. I don't know what I was thinking there. They definitely button on in both front and back. And I think I mentioned this briefly, but the skirt is actually attached to this waistband too. So I can't even flip this up. This is sewn down. And then the inside of the skirt is whipped to about the center of the waistband. That's a lie too. I forgot that I cut down the skirt so that it wouldn't go to the center of the waistband and bound all the edges with bias tape. And then in the back, it buttons. So you can see this a little bit in my dressing video, but I have hooks and bars, 3 large hooks and bars on the back of the waistband, and then the straps all button in. So when I'm getting dressed, I can keep one side buttoned to the waistband, and then the straps are sewn together where they intersect in the center back. So then all that I have to do is, once I have the waistband closure done, then the other strap has one more button that can be done in, and that way everything closes all nicely together and I don't have to worry about them, but they can be taken off. But in general, I just do that one button. The straps are unlined, by the way. I think that's about it for the jumper as well, which means that it basically finishes this outfit. The hat I actually made last summer for my white teens dress, and it was such a pretty close match that I decided I might as well wear it for this as well. It's a little bit smaller of a hat than I would have preferred for this era, but you know, you make do, especially when you're in quarantine. And the gloves are vintage gloves that I love wearing with almost all of my outfits. So I think that about covers it for everything for this outfit. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and if you did wind up with any questions, please do comment below. Just ask any questions you have. I will very much try to answer any of them. If you did enjoy this video, please go ahead and click the thumbs up icon. And if you'd like to see more videos from me, please go ahead and click subscribe and the little bell icon to be notified every time I post a new video. I post about once a week on YouTube, but I do post every day over on Instagram, so please go follow me on Instagram at Lady Rebecca Fashions. And I will see you in my next video. Happy sewing!